Well, good morning, everyone. My name is Avidan Cover. I'm professor and associate dean for academic affairs at the law school at Case Western Reserve University. Thank you for joining us today, and welcome to the sixth installment in our North Star Seminar Series. Unfortunately, Professor Ben Vincent can't join us today. He's feeling under the weather. We wish him, of course, a very speedy recovery. Now, if you've joined us for one of our previous events, then you know why we're here today. But for those of you who may be first-timers, let me tell you a little bit about the North Star Seminar Series. Case Western is driven by a vision called the North Star. It provides Case Western Reserve is a high-impact research university that aspires to be a community where humanity, science, and technology meet to create a just and thriving world. And to help further that mission, we highlight diverse people, diverse opinions, and diverse ideas, but always with the goal of engaging in a dialogue that is both civil and respectful. The series that you are engaging in today, this North Star Seminar Series, is doing just that. And we need conversations like this one today. We need to keep civil discourse and learning alive in our institution and in our community. And we're happy that you have joined us in this mission. When we began this seminar series in January 2021, we were struggling with a global pandemic, racial injustice, and insurrection. And now we are struggling to understand a war that challenges our ideas of humanity, the principles, legal instruments, and institutional structures purporting to maintain global order, security, and peace. As an institution of higher education, we are uniquely positioned to engage in this dialogue. We are a place where individuals can feel safe to discuss this difficult and complex issue while feeling heard and respected, and it's why we're here today. Now, to help us wrestle with the implications of the recent invasion and now full-fledged war, it is my pleasure to introduce today's guest speakers. Roman Sheremeta is an associate professor of economics at the Weatherhead School of Management and a research affiliate at the Economic Science Institute at Chapman University in California. He is a recipient of many research and teaching awards, including the 2018 Smith Ascending Scholar Prize, as well as multiple grants, including the National Science Foundation and the Max Planck Institute grants. He was listed as a top economic thinker of Ukrainian descent by Forbes in 2015, a top-rated young economist in the world, according to the Ideas ranking in 2018, and recognized among the best 40 under 40 professors by Poets and Quants in 2019. His research has been published in more than 60 leading scholarly journals, and in popular media outlets, he has been featured, including the Wall Street Journal, Forbes, NBC News, NPR, and Science Daily. More recently, Professor Sheremeta has been in Ukraine, helping to launch a new university there, and he returned safely to here in the US on just February 23rd. He has been advocating tirelessly for his native country since then, offering his insights to multiple local and national media outlets, and today with all of us. Also joining us today is Associate Provost and visiting North Star Distinguished Professor Paul Tiambe-Zeleza. Paul, I understand, has the distinction of being the only person to be featured on a North Star seminar panel twice. He was our first guest in January 2021 when he discussed the state of higher education and the role of interdisciplinarity in benefiting society. He has spent time at 12 universities in 6 countries on 3 continents and within the Caribbean region. Associate Provost Zeleza has held distinguished academic and administrative positions both in Canada and in the United States for the last more than 25 years. He has published more than 300 journal articles, book chapters, reviews, short stories, and online essays, and authored or edited 28 books, several of which have won international awards. He is a leader in academic governance, policy analysis, as well as an expert in African gender, diaspora, and development studies. His recent essay on the invasion and war includes excerpts on reading Putin, the morality of war, and political fallout. In it, he writes, "The nightmare of war has returned with a ferocity that has shocked Europe and threatens to upend the already unstable global order." Professor Sheremetya, Associate Provost Zaleza, thank you both for being here. We look forward to hearing some comments from each of you. Roman, let's start with you. But before you begin, I want to express on behalf of Provost Vincent and the university how proud we are of you. We know this is an incredibly difficult time for you and Ukrainians everywhere, but your voice, your perspectives are so important to be heard, and we're glad that you're here to help guide us. I know you're checking just as events are going on right now. How are you feeling right now? How are your family and friends in Ukraine?
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you, Case Western community, and for everybody who has been very supportive in the time like this. This is really means a lot, and so that you will understand the perspective. I actually, by coincidence, I flew out of Kiev the day before the full-blown invasion and the shelling of the city. So I just came to see my wife and my family, and I was planning to go back to Kiev around these days, actually, and didn't expect that this would be the outcome. I left behind my mom, my dad, my parents, my brother. A lot of our relatives, most of my relatives are in Ukraine, and so some of them are. My dad celebrated his 67th birthday in a basement. One of my faculty that I've been collaborating with and have asked her to join American University Kiev that I was working on as a part of my coming leave of absence in July. He is right now without electricity, without any connection, no food in the basements of Sumy city that is surrounded by the troops. And so I tried to reach out to her, see if she is alive, and to see if I can do anything to help her to reallocate. But she has two disabled parents that one of the reasons why she couldn't move away from Sumy, stayed there behind. Other faculty are either have joined the military on the front line to defend Kiev and other cities in Ukraine. They've been tirelessly helping, and again, the resources are depleting, and this is becoming more so difficult for them to handle both mentally and physically. This is, so you will understand, this is a full-scale war. And this is not just a war against military and against anything, which is the pretext of Putin, that this is a war against fascists and Nazi is disgusting as it can be, because if anything, Putin and his regime are acting exactly like Nazis in 1939 on a false pretext, invading the nation and eliminating and literally shelling cities and killing citizens. I just see countless of videos, which I cannot even share because of that brutality, where people are just being shot by the Russian military, civilians, not talking about military. I mean, they're shooting, they don't distinguish it these days. They couldn't take none of the major cities of Ukraine by hand, so they're trying to intimidate the civilians. That's why the shelling in the night of the civilians. That's why hundreds of buildings are now destroyed, civilian buildings, structures are just fallen. Just yesterday, the Russian military has attacked one of the biggest nuclear plants in Europe. I mean, we are on the brink of the one of the worst catastrophes in the world. Meanwhile, sanctions work. Yes, Russian economy is struggling, but that doesn't stop Putin. He continues to bombard and bomb and destroy Ukrainian civil population. That's I mean, it's scary to say this, but I do believe that's part of his agenda, as it's been the agenda of Stalin during Holodomor, is just to eradicate Ukrainian people because they never wanted to be a part of the Russian, Russian empire. And so because of that, this is Ukrainians will always stand against the, criminal, tyrannic Nazi regime of Russia. And so this can never be a part of, they can never be a part of, the Soviet empire. And the only way to deal with this for Putin is just literally to eradicate the nation of Ukraine. And it seems that this has been his plan all along. So the only thing that I can say right now is, I appreciate the West. I appreciate my Native America that has been doing a lot to stop this aggression. But I'll also say very clearly, we're not doing nearly as enough as we can or as we should. I understand that the full-blown conflict with NATO, between NATO and Russia, is definitely at this stage should not be discussed. But again, that you have to understand that somewhere along the way you need to draw a line. I mean, the question is how many millions of people have to be eradicated and killed before we say, okay, we're gonna, stop the shelling of the cities, at least stop the shelling of the cities, nothing more. We don't need, the Ukrainian people don't need the boots of NATO soldiers on the ground, but they need support. They need the anti-aircraft and anti-missile support that they can be given right now, just so that population will survive. So my prognosis today is more dim than it was before, just because none of the sanctions, none of the restraints that the West has been putting on Putin seem to stop him. And his response has been more and more escalation, more and more deaths of civilians of Ukraine. And so, it's with a heavy heart that I'm saying these things as I'm talking to you guys. On my side, what I'm trying to do, I've been petitioning, writing letters to President Biden, to congressmen, to senators, to governors, just asking, begging for any help that they can provide in addition to what has been already provided. And I have become a co-chair of one humanitarian charity organization that is right now collecting all the supports that we can get to, help Ukraine. Most importantly, we need medicine, we need helmets, and we need vests, because they're shooting civilians. I mean, this is it. We buy a vest for $700-800, that we at least have a chance of saving more civilians who walk in Kiev and in Kharkiv and in Sumy and in other cities that have been just bombarded. So if you want to join my effort, or I can drop a message here in the chat so you can help us out to raise this. But again, this is all I can say, is express my gratefulness and gratitude to the case community. And by the way, once this war is over, I want to invite all of you to participate in the effort of building American University Kiev, of building this world-class institution in the midst of the ruins. And this will be even more so important of a project to help Ukraine to develop and build as a truly independent, strong country, which we already proven that they are by their resilience to one of the strongest armies in the world. They've shown that they can defend themselves and they can stand strong against any aggression. And then they really strive to be a part of free democratic world. So I just hope that, you guys will be able to join me on that front as well. Thank you again very much.
Thank you, Roman, for those powerful and painful words, I know. And yes, please do put in the chat the information that we can all contribute. Paul, I wonder if you might offer a few initial thoughts and perhaps, one of the challenges, I guess, that Roman raised, is that notion, the idea that the world does have to draw a line, and where that line might be and what that would mean. So I'll let you speak to that, Paul.
Thank you, Evidan, and thank you to Roman for sharing those powerful words. And I want to thank the Provost for arranging this important seminar. When the conflict began escalating, and then, of course, the invasion took place on the 24th of February, I decided to write an essay as a part of an effort to try to understand this very, very major event, which is what I typically try to do. By reading and writing, it helps me to try to comprehend the causes of the conflict, the trajectory, and maybe the implications, in this case, implications for the world and the current global order. In my essay, I focused on 8 themes and tropes that seem to be framing the analysis of the crisis in different media, certainly in North America and Britain. Before I enumerate these frames, let me point out that our perception and analysis of events is almost invariably informed by where we are located, our social biographies, our educational backgrounds, of course, and ideological inclinations. In my case, I understand the crisis from some of the following vantage points. Professional as an academic, I was trained in African history and international relations, and have done interdisciplinary research in several fields, among them an edited 2-volume study on war and conflict. As a person, I've lived, as was noted earlier, and worked in 12 countries in Africa, Europe, North America, and the Caribbean, and visited more than 36 countries around the world. And one of my research projects, for example, in the African diaspora, took me to 16 countries in South America, Europe, and Asia. Politically, I've been involved in movements for intellectual and artistic freedom, for human rights, democracy, sustainable development, and progressive social change. And I happen to have enjoyed in my life citizenship of several countries, including Malawi, Canada, and the United States. From these multiple international and interdisciplinary angles, I see the Russian invasion legally as a breach of international law, morally indefensible, and politically destabilizing. As I read and wrote the essay, I identified 8 themes, namely reading Putin and how to decipher his motivations, the morality of war, the apportioning of responsibility for the conflict, the privileges of hegemony, the dynamics of Western responses, sanctions and punishment, the impact of sanctions, the arts of forecasting, how different people are trying to create scenarios for the trajectory of the conflict, and then the political fallout in terms of implications of the conflict in domestic politics in different countries, and then the economic costs, which we all understand in terms of the likely impact on global and regional economies, and finally, what I call the ghosts of history, the historical roots and analogies that are being advanced in reporting and analysis of the conflict. In my view, in trying to understand the conflict, we have to understand that it has multiple legal, moral, political, economic, and ideological dimensions. At a minimum, we need to understand it at 4 levels. So the first level is at an international level. It is about international law, as enshrined in the Charter of the United Nations, that oblige all states under Article 2, quote, in their international relations, to refrain from the threat or use of force against the territorial integrity or political independence of any state, or in any other manner inconsistent with the purposes of the United Nations, and to settle the international disputes by peaceful means, end of quote. At a multilateral level, it is about the rivalries between Russia and the European Union and NATO, about the contested settlement of the Cold War, and of course, Russia's efforts to renegotiate the post-Cold War order in Europe and reverse the expansion of NATO, while for the latter, it is about maintaining and expanding the frontiers of its political, economic, and geographical system. At a bilateral level, It is about what I would term, from the vantage point of African history, the post-colonial history and bilateral relations between Ukraine and Russia. The efforts of a proud post-colonial nation, Ukraine, to maintain its sovereignty and exercise its international relations as it sees fit. And for the post-colonial power, Russia, it is about maintaining a neo-colonial stranglehold. For the global system, I believe it is really about threats to world peace, security, and sustainable development by a regional European conflict. This is reminiscent, for those of us who do African history and world history, of the horrendous destabilizations and devastations of previous regional conflicts in Europe in the 19th and 20th centuries. In the late 19th century, inter-European rivalries spilled over into the new imperialism that led to European colonial conquests in Africa and Asia. And we all know in the early 20th century, inter-regional European rivalries led to the First World War and Second World War. The Cold War, which was engendered by what Winston Churchill called the Iron Curtain in Europe, led to numerous proxy hot wars in the global south. So this is a threat to all of us. And I'll say more about what we can all do in containing this threat. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. So to build off of that, as you note, the UN Charter prohibits the violation of the territorial integrity of other sovereign nations. That is precisely what Russia has done here. Many have suggested has committed a crime of aggression, and as Roman has described, and many of us have seen in the news, the attacking of civilian objects, persons, is also a clear violation of international law. Under international law, of course, there is a right to self-defense, and there is a right to collective self-defense. Roman, I guess I want to follow up again on I guess, these issues of line drawing. There seems to be a general perceived understanding. Certainly President Biden has made clear that US troops will not fight against Russian troops. And so it feels, although sanctions, as you noted, are perhaps more developed than have ever been seen, the harshest sanctions ever delivered. There is, and there seems a lot of self-congratulation on the part of Europe, the European Union. And so all of this action is being taken, and yet there's also an element of paralysis that it feels as though, a received wisdom that action cannot be taken. And so I guess, what does that speak both on a very, very, very real level, Roman, for your family and friends and for Ukrainians? And then also, what does that say about an international system that seems, if not anemic, not robust enough, not up to this challenge?
Well, I think that first of all, I want to give some praise to the international system, because they have stood up to the test, and pretty quickly. I mean, I'm pretty amazed that the sanctions have reached such a level that pretty much all major companies of Russia are bankrupt now. I mean, if you look at the international stock market in London, I mean, Gazprom, the Lukoil, all of the companies, their stocks have plummeted lower than 99%. I mean, this is like unheard of. The Russian oligarchs their properties have been seized, and there's a lot of, most of the companies have basically pulled out of Russia. Most, but Coca-Cola, yesterday I started a flash mob, just took my Coca-Cola can and poured out into the toilet and flushed the toilet. And I said, this is what should be done to, again, these are little things, but this is something that I'll be doing in order to make sure that we, because every dollar that Coca-Cola is contributing right now to Russian economy, this is a dollar that will be used to kill my citizens in Ukraine. So we have rose to the task. Most of the companies have done so. But there's still much work to be done. We've talked about the oil embargo with Russia. I mean, we understand that we're also paying the price, the higher gas prices. I mean, we were fueling our car yesterday with my wife, and we were like, yes, this is the price we're willing to pay in order to save lives. So that's on a positive note. But as Avi has indicated, I mean, it doesn't seem to be saving lives right now. Right now, the cities are being shelled. That the things are happening pretty bad. And here's where, I'm not advocating the boots on the ground, because I do understand the potential threat of that. But what I am saying is that we have the resources where we can give the military equipment to Ukrainian citizens, so the Ukrainian military that have already they've learned, first of all, how to fly. I mean, today our partner that started with me, American University Kiev, Kurt Walker, he was the ambassador to NATO and the special representative in negotiation with Putin during Trump's administration. He actually was on Fox News, and he was saying, I mean, he knows better than anybody else the level of threat and everything. He was saying the Stingers, the Javelins, these are good, hand-to-hand combat pieces, but when we talk about big time shelling, we need bigger guns. We need to have anti-aircraft missile. We need to have some planes like A-10 or something like that will be able to fly from. We need to establish this no-fly zone, at least on the western Ukraine in Kiev, basically saying you cannot be just annihilating people from the sky. This is just, I mean, it cannot happen. And this would not be the important part. This would be done by Ukrainian hands. The Ukrainian people would be dying, but they would be at least have a chance to defend themselves. And this is the kind of, and Biden's administration is saying, well, it's not time yet. Well, again, what's the time yet? When are we going to reach the time that we will be able to provide really serious military equipment? Because the Stinger that you have in your hand, you can reach out once the airplane is already shooting at you, or the helicopter is already, but if the airplane is going to shoot from the sky, from the above, and shoot at the buildings, you're not going to reach that airplane, So again, in the hand-to-hand combat, we can stop all the Russian tanks. Let them throw 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 tanks, whatever they have, they will die. All of those tanks will die on the Ukrainian soil. I can tell you that. We already seen more than 300 tanks destroyed. I mean, so this is not an issue. The issue is the air. And that's why there is such a strong voice and petition to stop that shelling, help us to stop that shelling. And I think that there will be a break point where, I don't know, 1 million people will die and 150, 200,000 people will die when they will see the atrocities that, people are just laying on the streets, hundreds of them, and nobody can take their corpus. Then that's when the government will say of United States, of France, of Germany, enough is enough. Well, I say we do this before that happens and actually help Ukraine defend. Again, this is not a direct involvement of NATO in Ukraine, but this is a much more stronger military support than what has been done so far.
Paul?
Yeah, I agree with everything that Roman said. There could be a lot more efforts in terms of supporting the Ukrainian people. Let me just also point out that as we try to, develop a global response to the crisis, what I've been amazed personally is the ways in which the UN, as ineffective as it tends to be in many cases, the UN has marshaled to meet and pass resolutions which collectively indicate the global opinion
Yes.
on this crisis. And as you know, 2 days ago, when the UN General Assembly met, and this is the first of the 11th emergency session of the General Assembly in its history. So this shows you how seriously the world community is taking this crisis, and that resolution passed on 2 days ago was sponsored by 106 states,
Yes.
with 141 voting in favor, only 5 against, and 35 abstentions. And the resolution was, absolutely unequivocal. If you don't mind, I can just share with you what it says quite clearly. Reaffirms its commitment to the sovereignty, independence, unity, and territorial integrity of Ukraine within its internationally recognized borders, extending to its territorial waters. Deplores in the strongest terms the aggression by the Russian Federation against Ukraine in violation of Article 2, Section 4 of the Charter, demands that the Russian Federation immediately cease its use of force against Ukraine and to refrain from any further unlawful threat or use of force against any member state. Also demands that the Russian Federation immediately, completely and unconditionally withdraw all of its military forces from the territory of Ukraine within its internationally recognized borders, deplores the 21 February 2022 decision by the Russian Federation related to the status of certain areas of the Donetsk and Luhansk regions of Ukraine as a violation of the territorial integrity and sovereignty of Ukraine and inconsistent with the principles of the Charter. Demands that the Russian Federation immediately and unconditionally reverse the decision related to the status of certain areas of the Donetsk and Luhansk regions of Ukraine and calls upon the Russian Federation to abide by the principles set forth in the Charter and the Declaration on Friendly Relations. So clearly, the world opinion overwhelmingly is opposed to this invasion and to the war. The question is, to what extent is the rest of the world prepared to put its money where its mouth is in terms of support? And this, of course, raises very difficult questions about the nature and state of international relations that I think all of us have a responsibility to understand, because if we don't understand, we won't be in a position in our respective communities, political communities, to make the kinds of interventions and pressures on our respective governments to do the right thing. And then we also may not be in a position to see how the rest of the world can be marshaled to take action that is truly collective and meaningful. Because every country, every region has its own perspectives and interests. And we need to understand what those interests are. What are the interests in this conflict of the African states, of the Asian states, of the Latin American states, and even some of the European states that perhaps are not as forthright or are under a certain form of geographical proximity to Russia and therefore cannot undertake certain actions. So we need to understand all that in order to be able, if nothing else, to have informed conversations, but more importantly, to become the kind of political actors in our respective spaces that are not only informed, but also can have the kinds of conversations and pressures that are useful to mitigating and resolving this crisis.
If I may just add one thing to Paul, and this is again about this collective unity in the world. So if you know the international court crime that basically has opened up the investigation against Russia for crimes against humanity and the war crimes. And this push has been now done by more than 30 countries. I believe it's now even more so. So basically, collectively, the world is saying not only they're condemning the war in Ukraine, but they're saying this is not just a war. This is a war against humanity. These are the crimes against humanity. These are war crimes. This is not a justly fought war. It's not honorably fought war. And so this is very important because if convicted, which I believe they will, I mean, if anybody has been connected with me on social media, I mean, I cannot put all of the stuff there out, or on LinkedIn, you have seen the atrocities that have been done. And again, it's not getting any better. So the evidence is overwhelming. And so, which means that Putin and his regime and his first officers and people who have been involved in this, this war are going to be convicted of the war crimes against humanity. So again, this puts yet even another unity in the world that we all agree and stand together on this issue.
Perhaps I could add to that point, the International Criminal Court, a number of African heads of state that were responsible for conflicts have been charged under the International Criminal Court. Except for a couple, they've actually not been brought to the court. The only one who has been brought was Charles Taylor from Liberia. And that was because Nigeria played a major role in making sure that happens. Unfortunately, when it comes to International Criminal Court, neither Russia nor the United States are members. And therefore, its power is legally, of course, it's important, but it's likely to be more moral and political than actually legal. This underscores the need for all countries in the world, including the United States, to really take international instruments of peace and security seriously, so that when we have atrocities like this that are being committed, it is then going to be a lot easier to bring the culprits to justice. In the current configuration of the International Criminal Court, it has not been able to do that, even for people like al-Bashir, the terrible dictator of Sudan. He's rotting in jail, but in the Sudan, he has not been tried. But he was, condemned by the International Criminal Court, and nobody even dared to arrest him. So the point is that the international community seriously needs to speak with one voice in terms of A, developing international instruments to maintain peace and security, and many have been developed, and B, in subscribing to these international instruments, and C, in ensuring they're implemented.
Just a follow-up perhaps on that. Of course, the Security Council, the UN Security Council, is in some respects the primary enforcement and most powerful body associated with the UN. And of course, Russia is one of those 5 permanent members, and so can impair the efficacy in many respects of the UN. And of course, notably China, which has not been part of that group of nations that you have included, Paul, in condemning Russia, remains in many respects a loyal ally of Russia. I wonder if you might both speak to both that element, that aspect of the Security Council that may inhibit some action, and also the role of China here.
I just have one comment regarding that. I mean, this is just hypocritical on our Western world side to have Russia on the Security Council as a head of the security, as one of the Security Council members. So the first thing that has to be done, Russia has to go from there. It's just, I mean, it's ridiculous that once you make the country that is an aggressor, that has started a war, cannot be on a Security Council, period. This has to be, I don't know, rewritten in the bylaws, in the documents, in the legals, but this cannot be. Of course, they're going to be blocking any resolution by the Security Council because they are the part of the war. They have started the war. So this is just my main comment at this stage. It cannot be the case that Russia is on the Security Council. It cannot be. I mean, this is inhumane. This is wrong. How can this be? I mean, this is one thing that I can just say. I don't know, maybe Paul has some other thoughts.
Yeah, thank you, Roman. I agree with your sentiments. The problem of the entire international architecture is that it's really based on the post-Second World War settlement. So you have the 5 permanent members. Russia, of course, took over from the former Soviet Union, China, and then Britain, France, and so on, and the United States. Now, I know that African countries and other countries in the so-called Global South have been arguing for decades, and those arguments have intensified since the 2000s, that this architecture is A, ineffective, B, because it is unrepresentative. So you have, for example, Europe, the 2 countries sitting in the Security Council from Europe are Britain and France, victors of the Second World War. Germany is a much bigger economy than those 2, and it does not sit on the Security Council. For Asia, you have China, which inherited that Security Council seat. But Japan, which is the world's 3rd largest economy and very influential country, is not anywhere. India, the most populous democracy in the world, is not anywhere near. And the entire African continent, and the entire Latin American continent is not represented on the Security Council. So some of the debates have been, how do you reform the Security Council to actually give it global legitimacy and to refrain from a few victors of the Second World War from exercising 75 years after the war, continued stranglehold on the world. In this case, Russia is going to veto, obviously. China is going to veto anything that is against China. The US vetoes anything that is against the US. So it's the same with Britain and France. So the question is, how do we rethink the global architecture of security of the UN system? I think that's a big question that we all have to take seriously. And certainly I know there's been a lot of pressure from African states for maybe this, for Africa to have a seat on the Security Council and have rotating membership of that seat, South Africa, Nigeria, Egypt, the three biggest African countries. That has not gone anywhere because it's been vetoed by those very powers.
Yeah, this is great. This is a great point, Paul. I completely agree with you. This is a very ineffective structure, and it also the rule of unanimity in terms of voting, it's flawed at its core, because as you pointed out, every single time something is going to go against US, we're going to veto everything. Every single time something's going to go against China, they're going to veto. So it's literally ineffective organization. So we need to redefine the rules of engagement.
Yeah. Thank you to both of you on those comments. I want to make sure we allow our audience of 70 strong individuals to participate and ask questions. So I open it up to folks. If you have a question for our two terrific speakers, please raise your hand, put something in the chat.
In terms of getting weapons to Ukraine, where do you feel like the pressure points are that we could exert pressure on our government to send the type of weapons that you were describing?
Thank you, Richard. So the pressure is with the Congress, Senate, and President. So there are some very strong supporters in the Congress that have been already, they have put together different proposals, and again, so now we just need to have a critical support on the Senate and on the Congress. Well, mostly in the Congress at this stage, and obviously the president. The president has to be willing to go with those recommendations, advice, because he's the commander in chief, and everything is going to stand with him. So the more, and also just to raise the awareness and support by people, the more the American people stand behind these proposals, the more we get into the news, the more we speak out loud that this is what has to be done. That's what's going to motivate and move our politicians, because unfortunately, everything is done through politics. The politicians are going to go with the people. If people are going to have a support for these specific policies, politicians will vote to support these policies, because otherwise they will not be reelected. Next term that our congressman or senator is going to run for, everybody's going to remind them, remember on Ukrainian issues, you didn't vote for it, you didn't support it. And so we need to voice it out. I mean, write letters, call Mark Devine. Just do basically as much lobby as you can. And Richard, thank you for that question, because this is really important.
Can I also ask, my impression is there hasn't been any demonstrations in support of Ukraine in Cleveland.
Oh, there has been. I've been participating in them.
Really?
Oh yeah. We had a big demonstration a couple days ago. There was demonstrations all over the states. In Washington, I was in Washington a couple days ago. But yeah, we had one in Cleveland, I believe, on Saturday, and we had probably more than 1,000 people there.
Good.
Thank you.
For Roman and Paul, question from Mark Swartz. He's curious. Of course, was an agreement. The Ukraine had nuclear weapons and gave them up. And the question that Mark asks is, what guarantees did the United States give Ukraine in exchange for the giving up nuclear weapons?
Yeah, let me start. Maybe Paul can add to this. So basically, in 1994, Ukraine has a large arsenal of nuclear weapons. It was believed like third or fourth country in the world as far as the arsenal of nuclear weapons. Now, what Ukraine has done, because these nuclear weapons have to be maintained and everything, Ukraine just became, a free democracy, and so they've decided, hey, we are fine giving this away upon the guarantee of Budapest memorandum of our sovereignty. So basically, this guarantee has been signed by United Kingdom, US, and for the irony, Russia itself. So these countries have guaranteed the sovereignty of Ukraine, the sovereignty of its territory in 1994. So if you guys hear this, and this is very important, sometimes people say, well, US has nothing to do with Ukraine. There's no legal binding agreement. Budapest Memorandum 1984, US has personally guaranteed sovereignty of Ukrainian territory, which has been breached today by one of the signature, Russia itself. So yes, this is, and Ukraine gave away their nuclear weapons for those guarantees. And today, US is obviously not following through with the guarantees, because Ukrainian territory is being attacked, and Ukraine annexation of Crimea. That's just one of the first steps. That's where the US had to step in the first place. And now it's a full-blown war. And so we're still waiting for a proper response. I know, Paul, go ahead. Maybe you can.
Yeah, I agree with everything you said. It's absolutely correct. There were the guarantees made by Russia itself, as well as the key Western countries, that in return for Ukraine giving up this huge nuclear arsenal, which was going to make it the third or fourth largest nuclear power in the world, it was going to, its sovereignty was going to be guaranteed. There are other countries that have tried to do that. One, so far hasn't paid any price. South Africa gave up voluntarily after apartheid ended its nuclear capability in terms of weaponry. Libya tried to do that, and Libya then became vulnerable to the attack by NATO. So, this raises big issues about nuclear disarmament in the world. What is the right way of going about it? Because, the nuclear powers, frankly, hold the rest of the world hostage in saying, if we can't win through conventional war, we're going to bomb you to smithers through nuclear weapons, as Russia has done recently.
Yes.
Well, and of course, Russia has repeatedly now referenced utilization of other nuclear weapons, whether they would be tactical ones, a disturbing development. There's a couple questions about media coverage. How would you characterize the media coverage here in the West about the war? And perhaps you may also speak about media coverage in Russia as well.
Well, I can start by saying that the media has been very supportive of Ukraine. I personally have every day 5 to 6 interviews, and I've been on the Fox News, I've been on CBS, on USA Today, pretty much all the major national media. And again, I'm not like a big player in this arena, but the local media has been constantly supporting. And the one thing that is missing from the US media specifically is the local touch. Is basically they have these generals, these politicians, these people that are thinking about what is happening in Ukraine instead of actually listening to Ukraine, listening to people on the ground, listening to Ukrainians. So what has been missing from the media, specifically in the United States, is the local voice of people that are hurting, or people who have relatives that are hurting there. And that's what's missing right now in the US as far as the media goes. When we say Russian media, it's a completely different story. Russian media is completely monopolized by the government. It runs a propaganda. That's all. There's no news reporting there whatsoever. So they have turned off all the connections, where they could to internet. They have just closed 2 semi-free channels that were not owned by media. Literally 2 days ago, they blocked those 2 channels. So literally every single media channel is controlled by Putin and his regime, and their narrative is very simple: we are winning this war. The world sanctions are ineffective. The Ukraine is causing the fascists in Ukraine are being eliminated. It's not a full-blown war. We're not shooting at the civilians. We're shooting all the military bases only. There's almost no casualties among civilians. Basically, it's just crazy. If you, I cannot even get on Russian media anymore because we block a lot of that. The Russia Today has been blocked. All of these propaganda channels have been blocked across the world. So you cannot even go from the United States and watch that media. I get the clips from it sometimes through other, group chat messages on the phone or something like that. And it's just, it's unbelievable. It's like they created their own world of propaganda. If you guys watch the Hunger Games, that's like exactly the society that you would imagine. They live in a completely different world, and so that's why the Russian people are brainwashed. They have been living in this propaganda, and it's so difficult. And that's why the support of Putin has been fairly strong, although it's been dwindling in the past. But yeah, it's a different 2 worlds, completely different 2 worlds. Paul, I don't know what you want to add to this.
I would say I agree again with everything that you said. What struck me watching television, cable, was the rather limited access that I find myself having, living here in the US, compared to when I lived in Kenya, for the last 6 years. As I say in my essay, if I was in Kenya now, I would have been, through cable, I would have not only gotten different African stations from South Africa to Nigeria to Egypt, but also different countries, Germany, France, Russia itself, Britain, of course, and Asian countries, India, Japan, China, the Middle East, and so on. So what I found is living ironically living in a country like Kenya, which is in the global South, you have more exposure to opinions from around the world compared to, here, where I've had to really dig deep to say, what are the Africans saying? What are the Asians saying? And of course, one cannot homogenize those places either because they are different countries. Africa has 54 different countries. So it's been challenging to really understand, for myself, what the rest of the world is actually saying without it being translated into what we are, seeing on television. Having said that, the print media is, the really good print media is of very high quality. And I've seen the sort of very, very informed debates in the print media, the New York Times, Washington Post, Wall Street Journal, and of course the various magazines and so on and so forth. I think all of us, what happens in moments of conflict like this is that we are, inundated by a barrage of news. And the first casualty of war is truth. We already live in a world suffocating with fake news and virulent and viral disinformation peddled on social media. And as Roman said, there's a lot of Russian propaganda and propaganda by other countries and so on. So our responsibility as people in educational institutions is to develop or deploy our critical reading skills, our information literacy skills, to discern or to distill morsels of facts and truth from the raging seas, if I can use that metaphor, of lies and self-serving propaganda. However, we also must be, as we are sort of, trying to distill all this stuff from different viewpoints, whether it's within our country or it's international, we must maintain our moral or ethical compass and not allow the deluge of daily news overwhelm us from understanding that the Russian invasion is a breach of international law, that it is a humanitarian disaster for the people of Ukraine and a threat to peace and security, not only in Europe, but it's also immensely destabilizing for the rest of the world. And frankly, it distracts attention from pressing global challenges, from climate change to economic inequalities, and between and within nations. Now, just to close that point, what I've been struck also is some of the coverage in some of the Western media has been fairly racist in this sense. So you find, on CBS, for example, the reporter said something to the effect that, you don't expect this in Europe. This is Europe. These are, blonde, blue-eyed people. They're middle-class people. The point is, you don't want war anywhere, whether in Europe, in Africa, or in Asia. And the fact that it's occurring in Europe, of course, is a tragedy. It's a disaster for all of us. The fact that Syria has been at war is a tragedy. It's a disaster for all of us. The fact that Ethiopia has been at war recently is a tragedy and a disaster for all of us. In other words, our hostility to war should not be racialized. It should be based on human dignity. All of us, as human beings, deserve to live in peace and in dignity. And we should not have a hierarchy of who is more deserving of peace and security than others. And unfortunately, the ways in which some of the African students, 20% of international students in Ukraine were from Africa. And the reports that some of them have been mistreated, unfortunately, is circulating like wildfire across Africa and informing and inflaming African opinions on the war.
Thank you, Paul. An important perspective that is worth noting, to be sure. We are at our closing time. We've even eclipsed a little. Roman, I want perhaps to allow you some parting thoughts.
I just wanted to thank you again and again for everyone who has been standing with us, with my country, with my people, with my parents, with my brother, with my uncles. It's a hard time for humanity, for our world, and especially for Ukrainian people who are going through some of the hardest time of their lives. For me, it's been the hardest week of my life, personally. I have received a lot of support and help, and again, I'm in a safe environment here in Cleveland, in Case Western Reserve University, one of the best institutions in the world, and have been very blessed to be, but it doesn't, my heart is with Ukraine. My heart is right now in Kiev. I feel guilty sometimes for leaving Kiev and leaving people behind because, again, I don't know how many of I'll see them. I'm terrified about the days to come and to hear messages from my faculty. And I just got a message from Anna Svidina, who is sitting in, I just got it. I'm sorry, guys. She says, "Dear Roman, both of my parents are disabled, and I don't think that I will be able to cross the country. I'm staying here where I am. Don't worry about me." Sorry, guys. I don't know if I'm gonna see Anna again. Another faculty. I just hope that we can do more as a nation, as a country, as a community, And again, I thank you for all your support.
Thank you, Roman. Thank you, Paul. We unfortunately have reached the end of our program. I think we have learned a lot from Roman and Paul today, and I think reminds us to be more informed as global citizens, as members of humanity, and that we can hope and pray and work for peace. Again, there are links in the chat to places where you can donate to assist. I thank you all for participating and wish you to be safe and well. Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Roman.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone.